Hey there, I'm Dean Perrine, Executive Vice President at JSA, and on behalf of our client, LightRiver, we thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, Accelerate the Automation of Multi-Vendor Networks. Just one housekeeping note before we begin. As you listen today, please do feel free to add any questions that you may have directly into the chat, and we will address those questions as time permits. If your question isn't addressed, have no fear. We will get back to you immediately after the webinar and get that question addressed. So all good there. With that, I am pleased to introduce you to our expert presenter for this webinar, Mr. Jason Garner. Jason is a sales engineer for LightRiver and will share with you some information on how LightRiver's netFLEX platform can help you automate data center interconnection, manage multi-vendor networks, and speed up network delivery. So lots of good stuff to discuss and not a whole lot of time to do it. So let's go ahead and get started. Jason, thanks for being here, number one, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dean, for that introduction. Once again, my name is Jason Garner. I'm one of the software engineers for LightRiver. I kind of specialize on the netFLEX software. So appreciate that introduction. So first of all, thank everybody for joining today. I know that time is a precious commodity. So for you guys to join us today is really special. So we're just going to jump right into a few things, start going through the webinar, and we'll kind of get right down to it. So thank you again. First of all, for those that are familiar with LightRiver and netFLEX, we usually go in, we talk about netFLEX with the GUI standpoint, talking about all the functionality that we have in the GUI, things that we can do, all of our analytics that we have. But today we're really looking at a different approach where we can take netFLEX and really use it as that middleware workhorse to kind of control that multi-vendor environment, how we're going to run those APIs, things that we can do through netFLEX and through that API standard set that we have to help you automate that network that you have today. So give me just 1 second here, and I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go through a few slides and we'll cover those real quick first before we get into the APIs themselves. All right. So accelerate the automation of multi-vendor networks and how we do that through our standard APIs that we have today. So we'll kind of go through some highlighting, some bullet points. So single unchanging API for network inventory for all vendors. So how are we going to use that, or how are we going to utilize that API structure that we have today to get that network inventory for that multi-technology, multi-vendor network that everybody has today? So we're going to use that standard API. And inventory can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. It just may be the location of a network element. It may be the chassis name, but maybe it's all your equipment, your cards, your pluggable modules, or maybe cross connects, wavelengths, things like that. So there's all things of things that you can inventory, but we're going to show you how to use a standard set of APIs today to do that. Integration of coherent optics. Today we have a lot of 400 gig optics in routers that are going through optical line systems to routers at the far end and kind of eliminating those transponders and DCIs. So we're going to learn how to look at those today through that API and monitor network health. How do we take that coherent signal over the OLS, look at it through a tool and see, is that circuit good, bad? Where is my trouble at? We'll go through all that today. And again, third-party tools, since we have all this data, things that we can do with the information, do we, take that to, like an example here is a path computation engine. Do you take that into a ticketing system? Do you take it into an inventory system? So all kinds of things that you can leverage with that data today. And again, that's going to allow you to focus on the automation and where you want to drive that to, and let us control the APIs for that standard set that you have. Leave that to us so you don't have to worry about that. So really what that's going to do, speed up your development time, speed up and make your resources a lot more efficient as you're doing that automation today. So what we have here is our netFLEX API screen. So this is our standard API screen that we've got. So usually, netFLEX is talking directly to the network elements, or we're always talking to the network elements. We're not really going to another vendor's EMS, so we're not reliant on that EMS to feed us data. We're getting the data directly from the network elements. So I've already authorized this specific instance that I'm using. So we're going to hop in and look at network inventory for all of our vendors. So I'm going to go down to our inventory, click on our API here. Then the first thing that I want to show is I'm going to take just a standard hit the try it out button, take a standard Sienna 6500, put my name or my TID of the shelf that I'm actually going to talk to here. And for just a general, network pool, say you just may want to retrieve the location of a particular network element. So I send that API to the network element. It comes back and gives me a response. So here's my 6500. Here's my latitude and longitude, my geo coordinates. If there was an address built in there, that would be there. So you're getting your release, all that information is there. So that's just a standard and very basic inventory pool, as I kind of talked about before. So, but if we want to get into the equipment aspect of it, what is actually physically sitting in the shelf? What data can we retrieve there? So I'm going to change some options here for my equipment holders, and I'm just going to get a full report for the equipment. I'm going to execute that again. I'm using the same API, not changing the API at all. I'm just changing the data that I want to pull in the API. So it goes out, gets that information from our server, and then we look again. We still got our geo location there. We scroll down a little bit more, but we started getting into the shelf, our OSCs, our P155M cards. Then we go on down to our other cards that we've got. You can see the PET codes here, the CLI codes. So we're getting that, pluggable information, everything that's there that's plugged in equipment wise for the shelf that we're getting. So you see that right off the bat in that standard API. So that's just a standard 6500. There's also, tons of other information you could pull. You've got your physical port terminations, your connection point terminations. You can pull those also. You can pull a list of cross connects, things like that you can pull to get that network inventory out. So now we can switch over to a different type of network element. So I'm going to come in, instead of using a Sienna 6500, I'm going to do the same thing for an Infinera G42. Not changing the API at all. All I'm doing is changing where I want that API call to go to. So now I'm going to my Infinera G42, scroll down, hit execute, sends the API call back. You get your curl command there, you get your URL. So if you're talking machine to machine, this Swagger page is really helping you create that development process between the netFLEX server and whatever device you needed to talk to. So again, now for the G42, we're getting our latitude and longitude. We're getting some more information about the G42. Then we get into the guts really of the G42 and what is slotted in that particular shelf. So you start to see your CLI codes and everything for your G42 at that point. Again, super simple. So from a development standpoint, I haven't changed the inventory API at all. I'm just changing what data I'm requesting for that inventory API. So our next example that we can kind of go into is looking at, your routers going across your optical line systems or transponders to see that end to end. So we're going to take the same G42 that we did our example on for our inventory, but we're going to use it for a circuit example in this point. So I'm going to go up to our circuit trace API, select try it out. And again, just dropping the TID in there of the G42 that I want to talk to. And the only other information that I'm going to enter now is actually just where I want that circuit trace to begin from. So I'm just designating the port in the G42, click execute. So now it's going to tell me where this port in the G42 is going to, so I can come up and look. So hanging off this port in the G42, I've got 100 gig connected to a Cisco router, back through my client side on my G42 there. Then I'm going to start looking at my line side, sorry. Then I'm going to go into, actually, this is a 1830. We're going to cross the 1830, go to a far end G42, my line side there. There's my client side on the G42, back to a Cisco ASR router. So now with one API call, we've really talked to multiple technologies, multiple vendors in the same API call to see where that network or that circuit is going end to end through your network. So a lot of things, another thing you'll see today in networks is 400 gig optics in routers. So if we start looking at that, I can pull up a Cisco 8201. All I've got to do is just change where I'm talking to or that device and my starting point for the circuit that I want to look at. So I'm going to look at port 2 here on this 8201. Again, just hit same API, just changing a little bit of information that I'm calling to. It's going to execute that out. There's my curl command that it built. There's my URL. So now I've got a 400 gig port on my Cisco 8201. Now I'm going over our Smart Optics OLS system. a little point-to-point smart optic system. So there's my line side of the optical system all the way down to the Cisco 8201 at the bottom. So again, we're showing it network end to end, but you're seeing that multi-vendor, multi-technology, all from a single API. So now if we get into, how do we look at the health of that circuit? How do we monitor that network health throughout our API segment? So now I'm going to pull up a DCI box, one that's used commonly used in a lot of network elements today. But now the API that I'm going to use is our circuit analysis tool. So everything that we've kind of been looking at now, up to now, netFLEX is always looking for database changes, new equipment added into the network, removed from the network. And netFLEX is taking that information, storing that, and saving that onto the netFLEX server. And that's how we're pulling this information up. But now when we get into our circuit analysis tool, we're actually going to go out real time and do some analytics on the circuit that we're looking at. So I'm going to put in my wave server here. There's a ton of wave server AIs out there today, so it's very common that we have that. So in this instance, I want to turn our PM off just as we retrieve this, because it'll be a little bit quicker. Because now when I hit the execute button, instead of pulling that information directly from our server, we're actually going to go out to every network element in this path and look at alarms, port state, light levels, things like that, and put that in that API output. So again, there's our curl command. Now we're getting to a little bit of analytics of it. So we successfully got to our wave server. We see our port states are up. They're all, there's our rate, our wavelength that we're using. You can see that you can come down here. We can look at our transmit light level. So I'm kind of going to highlight that so you can kind of focus there. So we've got a transmit light level. We're giving it a success because our minimum and maximum values are here that we've defined, but here's our actual levels. So we're passing that light level. So we've got 4 lanes of traffic in this example. So we're going to do that same analytics for all 4 lanes and tell you if that light level is within our range with a pass or a fail statement. So if it's pass, it's good. So you can go on to the next receive level for that same. So now we've got our minimum maximum values. So here's the receive level come in for each lane of traffic. They're all passing. So that's good. So you can take that data and feed it into maybe a ticketing system. So if you're looking for a fail or a pass, you actually know where to dispatch to. So we have a ton of customers that do this today that'll run this automated in the background, run our circuit analysis tool, and wherever the fail is, they can look there and they know where to dispatch out immediately. So that initial troubleshooting is kind of done by the API and the ticketing system in the background. So you can see as we go through here, we pass all these. There's our smart optics all the way back down to the far end. So you can see all that data there. So that's really how you're looking at that end to end to see that. So let's take our 400 gig example. So we're going to go back up to the same API for our circuit analysis tool. So I'm just going to change the location that I'm making that call to, and I'm going to change the port that we're going to see that on. Get my information here. So this time, I'm going to execute it again. Again, we're going out to that 8201, pulling that equipment, your port states, all your light levels, things like that, your optical line system that it's going to traverse. We're doing that also for the same. We're going to pull that. So you see this, sometimes it takes a few seconds for this API to complete, but you're pulling live data from the network elements. So now we go in, there's our 8201, there's our 400 gig port, everything is up. We're looking at our light levels here. There's our transmit light levels, we're getting a pass. There's our receive light levels, we're getting a pass. So you can kind of, walk along that path and see all that data to see where your trouble is at. You can see, dynamically where you need to dispatch at. So maybe you run all this and you still don't see any trouble. So we can go in and now we can say, let's run the same thing, but let's look at some PM data, because netFLEX is always looking at your PM data also. So just like we say in our normal GUI demos, netFLEX is going out, looking at that data over a 24-hour period and stored in the server. So now we're taking that same data that we have on the server, but now in our circuit analysis tool API, we're going to show you that PM data also. So as you can see, it's gathering all that PM data, all the same port states that it did again. It's running that same circuit analysis test once again, and we're going to show that data to you here as it completes this. So we'll give it a second to complete that, and there it comes back. So there's your curl command with the PM data. Same exact information that you have up here, the same transmit and receive light levels, you're going to get that data. But now, as you notice, we're getting into our montops. So if there's any, collisions or, alignment errors, CRC errors, any of those errors that we would pick up and store on the server, we're going to show those to you now. That way you can see if there's an underlying problem that you need to investigate. So all that data is there for you via that API. And the only thing I've done is really just change what little data I want to retrieve in that API. So we'll go on and look at, so OTN hierarchy is another one that we've got in here. And this is a really good example of, looking at how is that the levels structured throughout a shelf, throughout that OTN layer, how you got your OTS, your OMS, and how that kind of lines up in the data field, and really looking at, what do you do with that data and how you can feed that into a couple of examples. So bear with me while I scroll in here for just a second to our wavelength services. And you can see there are hundreds of APIs in here that you can use. We've got, wavelength service report. There's some provisioning APIs that we have in there also. You can see a ton of stuff in there that you can do. Like, again, I'm just highlighting a few to kind of really give you an idea of where you can kind of take that data, what to do with it, and how you can associate that data with what you have today. So in this example, I'm going to pull up a Sienna 6500 again, just because there's a little more information that we can look at on it. So I'm going to go in, put our TID in here, not defining anything. You can define on which kind of level of that OTN layer that you want to look at. But in this case, I'm just going to pull it off. So I'll hit execute there. Again, standard API, whether this is, a transponder like that G42 or a wave server or a Nokia 1830, Sienna 6500, same API, the same standard. We always kind of make it look the same to that end user or to that machine. It's always going to be the same for that standard output there. So what we have here, this is like the OTN hierarchy for this shelf. So we start at the OTS layer. You see your circuit IDs there. Then you go down to the OMS layer. You get all your information there till you start getting into your circuit level stuff and seeing everything that's riding across those spans. So you can see your number of available channels, your starting frequency, ending frequencies, everything that's related to those circuits. You see that here as you see this OTN layer. And you can see it's spitting out everything for this shelf, everything that you have there. So, do you take this layer to see where all of your traffic is kind of being groomed out along a path, or you have too much traffic there or not enough traffic to another location? Do you have stranded traffic where it's not really going anywhere? So you take that, maybe you feed that into a path computation engine to see where you need to make your traffic diverse at. Do you take inventory, kind of feed it into a provisioning database or an inventory system? There's all kinds of things that you can do with the data and really just kind of get your wheels turning of how you can use that data and what you can do. But really, you got the speed and efficiency of only having a single API for multiple vendors. You don't have to worry about having an API dedicated for Nokia or an API dedicated for Sienna or an API dedicated for Cisco. We're going to give you just one API so you can kind of use that across the board to have that standard set of APIs. So these are kind of just some examples that you can kind of go through and see today. But again, it can mean, multiple things to multiple different people as far as what APIs that we have today. So right now, as far as APIs, that's really all I have. I think there's a few questions in the chat that we'll kind of cover. If you want to, we can kind of go through those. Question number one that we've got, is this a cloud or is this a hosted environment? Really can be either. We offer a couple of different features with netFLEX. We do have that in a hosted environment where you actually have the netFLEX server and the API server there. They would be on the same VM or the same metal server. So you can use it there. But we also do have a hosted environment where you can go in, actually connect that up to the cloud if you wanted to use that, and you would have a direct, dedicated, secure connection from your network to that cloud network where everything can be ran back and forth there. Let's see, another question that we have, is a field trial or a proof of concept possible and easy to do? Yes, in short, yes. So we run proof of concept and trials all the time. So we have a number of trials going at all times, and that is usually running anything from a netFLEX server from the GUI standpoint, also in conjunction running our APIs. So the way that would usually work, we would go in, you could turn up a VM on your network. We would come in, install netFLEX, install the APIs, and one of our tech support engineers or sales engineers would come in behind that, install all of your network elements, work through any communication issues that you have with network elements, getting those enrolled in netFLEX, getting those talking, and we kind of do that heavy lifting for you on the back end, getting everything working. Then we would work with you on what APIs you want to test, what data that you want to see, to make sure that you're actually using that data correctly, getting the information that you need, because you need to speed up your process. You need the information as precisely as you can get it. So we'll work with you on end to get that done. And we can do that just as easily, within an hour. We can usually have a netFLEX server stood up and talking to network elements. It's a pretty quick process that we can handle all that for you in the background. I think that's all the questions that we have today, unless anything else comes in the last minute. Dean, that's all I have. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to close it out.
And thank you to all who joined us today for the webinar. We appreciate you as well. And we invite you to visit lightriver.com for any additional information that you might need. Be well, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.